Welcome back to Keeping Up with Cleopatra, Part 2. At the end of the first episode, we had two sets of infighting. In Egypt, Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII had been left as co-rulers. But this was not working out. They were constantly fighting for power and trying to overthrow each other. In Rome, the first triumvirate had formed as a group of power players. However, this had dissolved, and now we had a civil war between Pompey and Julius Caesar. And here we can see the extent of the Roman Republic at this time. And we can see that Egypt is sitting in here and is a very tempting territory because Egypt was producing a large amount of grain, which Rome and everybody else wants. So, just a little overview. What happened last time is that after Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, did a deal with Rome to basically, he paid them off so that they would not make Egypt a Roman territory. However, that left him bankrupt and caused instability. After he died, he leaves the throne to Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII because he can't leave it to just Cleopatra because they wouldn't have accepted just a female. There's a lot of fighting between them. And Ptolemy XIII is younger. He's a teenager. And so he has a number of older advisors who are trying to control him as well. They agree to send support to Pompey, who was basically on the run from Julius Caesar. So at 48 BC, their squabbles between Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra are continuing, and he is starting to come out on top. So Cleopatra leaves Alexandria and she goes to Roman Syria, which is basically the next door country, with their younger sister Arsinoe to gather an army. She gets her army and she comes back, but Ptolemy's soldiers block the way. So here we have Alexandria over here. She has gone up here to Syria, collected her army, and returned back, but stopped here at Pelusium. Now, while this is going on, Pompey and Caesar have had this huge battle, and it is at Pharsalus here in what is now Greece. Now, Pompey loses that battle, and he basically has to run off to somewhere where he can gather his forces. And Egypt is a convenient location here. It's also a neutral territory. It is not part of Rome at this point, so he thinks it's going to be a safe place. Now, Ptolemy XIII was not really keen on this because he was worried that if they gave support to Pompey, then Julius Caesar and his troops are going to turn up and suddenly Egypt is in the middle of the Roman Civil War. So his regent, Pothinus, has a plan. He sends Pompey to Pelusium, and when he arrives, he gets off the ship and is ambushed and murdered by Achilles, who is Ptolemy's general. So Pompey has been assassinated. Now, Ptolemy XIII has Pompey's head embalmed, preserved, and when Julius Caesar arrives in Alexandria, Ptolemy presents it to him like he is giving him a gift. And it's going, look, I have had your opponent killed. It's kind of saying, you owe me now. Caesar publicly expresses grief about this. He's horrified that, it is one thing to kill your opponent in battle, but it is completely different when he is basically assassinated in a sneaky manner. It's a betrayal. And so Caesar basically acts outraged about this. Now, he may have personally been okay with the fact that Pompey had now been removed, but publicly he is very outraged and grief-stricken. And he tries to get Ptolemy 13 and Cleopatra to reconcile. And as part of that, he's staying in the royal palace in Alexandria. So he is basically now setting himself up as a peacemaker between the two siblings. This is a later piece of artwork, which is basically showing the head of Pompey being presented to Julius Caesar. Now, we're going to give you a little bit more background on Julius Caesar here. Now, he is a main character, and a bit of background. He was born in 100 BC. He was from a very well-respected family in Rome, and there are a lot of stories that he had seizures, and it could have been epilepsy. That's what's been believed for many, many years. Other theories are that it could have been due to malaria, in which case it wouldn't have been a seizure, but a fever episode. And as we had in the first episode, in 60 BC, he was part of the first triumvirate. Now, he actually had several marriages. His first marriage was to Cornelia, who was the daughter of an influential family, and they had a daughter called Julia, who was married to Pompey as part of the first triumvirate to bind them together. And it's after Julia dies that Caesar and Pompey fall out. After his first wife Cornelia died, he married Pompeia, and they divorced because of an incident where a man sneaks into a religious ceremony which was for women only, and his intent was to seduce Pompeia. Now, there is no record at all that she was part of this, that she slept with him, that she was involved with him. However, all of these rumours and everything that went out around about it led to this saying, Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. You know when they say, where there's smoke, there must be fire. The idea was that there were so many rumours about her that it was reflecting badly on Julius Caesar. They were going, oh, well, what kind of man is he if his wife is off doing these things? Which she was not doing. So they divorced. And in 59 BC, he marries Calpurnia, who is again from a well-respected Roman family. She is only 17. He's much, much older than her. Now, throughout all three of these marriages, he'd had a lot of affairs, and this was a well-known thing, which makes the hypocrisy of what happened to Pompeia even worse. She hadn't actually done anything, but just the rumor of it was enough. Whereas Caesar had done a lot. He had a lot of affairs. Now, going back to Alexandria, we now have the royal palace where we have Julius Caesar, and he's trying to act as a peacemaker between Ptolemy and Cleopatra. And they've got different responses to this. Ptolemy takes his army and he basically is not going to give in. Cleopatra sends messages to Caesar, and then went to see him herself. Now, there is a story that she was smuggled into the palace to get to him, and this is from Plutarch, and he was a philosopher and author who wrote a series of biographies of important people. But we do note that he lived many decades after this. So he is reporting on things that he wasn't there for. He's basically going on records and stories of these events. So Cleopatra has managed to get into the palace to talk to Julius Caesar. And when Ptolemy finds this out, he is mad. He sees it as she is sneaking around, she is not acting honorably, and he tries to get the people of Alexandria up into a riot to basically overthrow any of Cleopatra's influence. Caesar has him arrested and he makes a speech to calm down the situation. And this is something which Julius Caesar was very well known for. He was described as an orator. He gave really great speeches. Caesar points out that according to their father's will, they're joint heirs. They have to act together. He then makes the two younger siblings, Arsinoe and Ptolemy 14, joint rulers of the island of Cyprus. Cyprus had been a territory of Egypt, and it was one of the things which their father had lost influence over, was the fact that he had lost control of Cyprus. So giving Cyprus back to them was seen as a very positive move. It also is very helpful in that it's removing two of the siblings from Egypt. And Egypt is just not big enough for four of the Ptolemy siblings. So we have Cyprus is this large island here, and everyone else is hanging out here in Alexandria. Now, in theory, this was a good plan, but it does not go well. So Ptolemy, his regent Pothinus. So this was the man who was basically guiding him, making official decisions, because Ptolemy 13 is still underage. Pothinus is not happy about this because he sees that Cleopatra is being favoured, because by this point, she's sleeping with Julius Caesar. Caesar is not exactly impartial at this point. So Pothinus and the general Achilles bring in 20,000 soldiers to Alexandria, and they basically surround the royal palace. So inside the palace, we have Caesar, we have Cleopatra, and we also have young Ptolemy 13, and they're surrounded by soldiers. Cleopatra can't get out, Julius Caesar can't get out, and they're holding Ptolemy 13 almost as a hostage to basically make sure that the entire palace isn't overrun by Ptolemy's supporters. Now, Caesar does have some soldiers there, and they manage to capture Pothinus, and he is executed. But we still have Achilles leading the troops for Ptolemy 13. And we now have their younger sister, Arsinoe. She joins up with Achilles and declares herself queen. Her tutor Ganymedes then kills Achilles. So now Arsinoe has set herself up as queen. She's got around 20,000 troops, which had been Ptolemy 13's, and her tutor Ganymedes is taking over those troops. They send a message into the palace and they say, let Ptolemy 13 out to us and he can negotiate between these parties. However, once Ptolemy 13 is released as a negotiator, he then joins up with them and they are now going to attack the palace. Now, there is no hostage inside, basically. Ptolemy 13 is outside, he's going to attack it. Now, Caesar and Cleopatra were basically trapped there for several months until his reinforcements arrived. When his reinforcements arrive, Ptolemy 13 and Arsinoe retreat along the Nile. Caesar's troops attack them. Ptolemy 13 tries to flee by boat, but it capsizes and he drowns. And it's a bit of an anticlimax, We expect him to be dying in battle or something. No. And without him, and with the more troops of Julius Caesar's from Rome, Arsinoe is defeated. She's exiled to the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, and this is basically trying to remove her from the situation. During this time, Cleopatra is getting very, very obviously pregnant. They were trapped inside for several months, and things were happening. Caesar now appoints Cleopatra and her youngest brother, Ptolemy 14, as joint rulers. He's still not sure that Egypt will accept Cleopatra on her own. So he appoints Ptolemy 14 there as well. And to follow the pattern of the pharaohs, they were in a sibling marriage. Now, this is really just paperwork. They're not really married as such. It's a legal thing. It is very much that Cleopatra is living with Caesar, she is ruling, and the younger brother is just there as a figurehead. However, Caesar is now having to leave the situation. He leaves Alexandria and goes up to Anatolia. He's actually been stuck in Egypt for quite some time now, and he has the rest of the Roman Republic still has things going on with it. He also has a situation because he is still legally married to young Calpurnia, who he left behind in Rome. And Cleopatra is very obviously pregnant with his child. And he decides that now would be a good time to leave this situation. So Cleopatra gives birth to a little boy in 47 BC, and she names him Caesarion, so named after Caesar. She very publicly announces that he's the father, but Julius Caesar won't admit to this. He basically denies it. It's like he is not admitting this. And this is an ongoing issue between them. So where we are now at, Cleopatra and her youngest brother, Ptolemy 14, are supposedly joint rulers. However, she is doing all of the ruling. She's just had a child with Julius Caesar, but he has gone back to Rome now. He's gone to Anatolia, now he's going back to Rome, where he has a wife, Calpurnia. Is he going to acknowledge Caesarion as his child? Is he going to give Cleopatra continued support from Rome? And we're going to continue with this next episode.